Hey everyone, welcome back to Taking Back Monday. I am so excited that you decided to join us and say goodbye to the Sunday scaries and hello to much more meaningful work. And I am so excited to introduce you to my good friend, Mike. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So, Mike, we actually met in a very similar environment several months ago when I was a guest on your podcast.
Yes, exactly. It was a great episode too. You were one of my earlier guests, actually. I think you were probably in the first 25, I think. Yeah.
All right, the OG club. I love it. So, Mike, one of your, tenets of your podcast that you have is all about leadership, particularly in the technology space. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into that.
Well, I used to be a CTO. I was a CTO for 2 decades, and I myself ran into issues where I hadn't been trained how to be a leader. You're just kind of pushed up the ladder, pushed up the ladder, pushed up the ladder, and then here's a department to run, and you're like, hey, how do I do it? And I was finding myself working way too many hours. So I started to look at every aspect of my work life and go, all
Mhm.
right, why am I doing that? I have a team for this. And why am I doing this? I have a team for that. And I realized that I was doing way too much as far as like jumping in and helping them with tasks rather than being like, oh, you needed some advice. Here's my advice. Now go take care of it. If you have any more problems, come back. So I created what I now call the decentralized A team method. And that's an A. It comes off as 8 sometimes, but it's an A. And basically the concept is just decentralized leadership. You
Yeah,
have a team, they each have their role, let them do their role. That's the best way, in my opinion, to lead.
I 100% agree with that. And it's so funny that you kind of opened with that. Each year I pick a theme word for my year, right? So last year, my theme word of the year was accountability, holding people accountable, holding myself accountable. So 2023 was the year of accountability. 2024 is the year of delegation for me because it's something that I really struggle with because sometimes I don't know how to articulate what I'm looking for, right? I know it when I see it, but when you're a leader, that's not really the best way to do work, to have your team just kind of like blindly shoot in the dark and then either hit the target or completely miss. Like that's a very unfulfilling experience for everyone involved. And you mentioned that you kind of just got promoted up through the ranks without any kind of leadership support and training. What did you do once you realized that you had a leadership gap?
Um, Thankfully, there was a couple of things that happened. Around that same time, I moved roles. I switched companies, and I was working for a restaurant delivery service, and
Mm.
they were struggling with any kind of direction. And they were owned by two brothers and a best friend. And one of them was the CEO, one of the brothers, and he went to some kind of a seminar or something where he learned about a company in California called Management Action Planning. They go by MAP for short. You can find them on LinkedIn. They're a resource I definitely recommend leaders look into. But what they do is they assign you a consultant, and that consultant comes out once a month and runs a team meeting for you. But he also, in doing so, gives you a structure for running your own team meetings. So one of the first things I did was start making use of that with my own team, like kind of trickle down. So we're at the top. Let's teach our team how to do the same things. That's one of the first things I did. And I'll admit, I mean, I've modified a lot of their principles into what I
Yeah.
call the PACE system these days. But it works because what they do is their motto is what you measure can be managed. And so they talk about their vital factors, for instance. And so you might be watching like your profit margin really closely because that's a key issue for your company. And if you don't measure it, you can't really manage it. And so that started to like ring bells in the back of my head that like, well, I have this team and like we have one-on-one meetings once a week, but really all I'm looking at is task lists. Like, what about
Hmm.
their development? How do I make sure that if they feel they're not good at maybe communication or maybe they're not good at time management, how do I make sure that they get help with that? And I think those are the things that are important for leaders to do is identify the gaps in their team and help them fix those things. And so I started doing that with myself and with my team. And I saw a lot of rapid growth, both in myself and my team, thanks to the MAP program that we went through.
That's
Interestingly,
really, really cool.
interestingly, they call it being maptized, which I
Mapped.
got quite a kick out of.
I
But it's
love that.
true. Like nowadays, I even run my businesses today using their principles. Like we have a vital factor spreadsheet for our entire host of businesses, and it's just great. At any moment, I can be like, "What was last month's whatever?" And I can go in there and I can look and see. So it's really helpful for making decisions.
I love that. There was a gentleman that I used to work with who would always say, you have to define success, because if you don't define success, someone else will define it for you, and very rarely in your favor. And it's like so important to sit down and say, what does success look like? Let's agree on that, because otherwise the goalposts are going to keep moving.
Exactly. That having that definition, I like to say it's like, everybody these days, we use GPS to get around places. And so
Yeah.
literally, if you haven't been to a part of town before, you can find it. But if you didn't use a map, pretty much any road you take would technically be correct because you have no clue where you're going. So if you have no
Right.
clue where you're going, you just jump on the road and wherever you end up, that was the right place. But
Right. If
really,
you
is
have
it?
no destination, then of course anywhere you go is right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think it is important to define what success means to you, because it means different things to different people.
100%, 100%. Where, I think the way people feel and respond to progress or lack thereof success, right? So if I've set the goalpost and it's something that you have no impact over and you can't have an impact on in your daily job, like you're on the revenue team, but we've set a retention success of how many employees we retain, and that's how we define success. You're not really impacting that, right? Beyond like bringing in money, bringing in growth to ensure that we have enough budget to pay for this headcount. But the culture is something that you don't necessarily have direct control over. So as a leader, especially in IT and technology and those kind of like those CTO roles, one of the things that I've observed is that sometimes they intentionally or unintentionally are siloing their tech teams. They don't have a seat at the table, if you will. Tell me how, as an IT leader or a CTO, how can I overcome that?
Well, that's actually where the concept of my pay system came in. We talk to the team every month in a monthly meeting, but we also have weekly touch bases, but they're super short, maybe 5 minutes in length. And we find out what struggles they're having. And I make sure that I have a seat at the table by doing that. Opening a line of communication, making your team understand that it's okay to come and ask you questions. I love when a lot of people will say there's no such thing as a stupid question, and then they'll sort of berate people for asking questions. And it's really, to me, it's kind of a duh kind of a thing, like no duh. There's no such thing as a stupid question, because why do people have questions? They're curious about something and they don't know the answer. Or
Yeah.
would you rather they just not ask you and, go down the wrong road? Of course not. As a leader, the buck stops with you. And so you have to make sure that everybody underneath you, so to speak, who reports to you, that they're on board with your mission, vision, and values for your department. And I think that's a key thing. Like I talk about culture a lot in my program and how cultural fit is important, because if I hire, the only way I can kind of compare it, I live in Las Vegas. And so there's a lot of people who are like super party animals. And then there's those who stay at home, and if the leader was a stay at home person, I don't think he's going to fit super well with the super party animals. He has to have
Right.
the right mix. And so by getting that right, once you get that right mix, now you guys are speaking the same language. You're heading towards the same goalposts. Then you are inherently a part of that because you created the definition for your department. And I get people saying all the time, like, well, the culture in my company is terrible, but I don't have any control over it. That may be true,
Right.
but you're the leader of a department. You can create culture within that department. And that's really something to remember. Don't give up just because your company has some issues. Make your department the one that everyone else wants to be a part of. But yeah,
Yes.
I mean, being a part of the discussion and is really important. And so like one of the things that I do in meetings is, let's say we use a super simple example. There's a problem with the email server and you have a person who's the email administrator. So that's their job. But then you have a help desk lead. And so there's a problem with the email server. I put the help desk lead in charge of the project, but of course they're going to utilize the email administrator to get it done. And in putting those two people together, help desk technician now learns what email administrator goes through on a day-to-day basis and vice versa. And so now they're exposed to each other's jobs, all of whom report back to me. And when I get those touch-based meetings, I'm also getting feedback on those things. I call the section of that meeting what's working and what's not working. So we celebrate the things that are working and we assign fixes to the things that aren't working. And it makes everybody understand what the other person's role is on the team. And what you start to notice, especially when you get a new person, they'll come in and they're sort of lost. They don't know who to talk to. But then as you start to, hey, you're going to be helping this person with this task. Over time, they know what everyone does. And they know, oh, well, I have this problem. I got to go to John. I have this problem. I have to go to Mike. They know who to go to. And I think that's really the only way to not be a micromanager, but also stay involved in what your team is doing.
I talked to someone who works in hospitality a few weeks ago, and one of their things that they think makes a huge difference in their team cohesion is that cross-training concept, exactly what you just talked about. Like, if I can understand what the line cook is doing and have empathy for what the line cook's experience is, then I'm much more likely to be successful as someone who's working in a server role and vice versa, right? Because we're all here to do our function and our jobs, but we are part of an ecosystem that's trying to be successful together. And if I don't understand and have appreciation for the rest of the ecosystem, then how can I ever expect to be successful as a whole?
Exactly. And with tech teams, there's roles that butt up against each other. And so maybe part of the team is a little downstream from the issue, but then they have another part of the team that's right in front of them. They need that part of the team to understand what they're doing so that they can make the proper decisions upstream that don't cause problems downstream. And that becomes really essential. And the only way you do that is by knowing what the other people are doing. I can't properly, as a CTO, one of the reasons why I could give feedback on everything is I did all the roles. I was a database administrator. I was a help desk technician. I fixed computers. I did it all. So because of that, when they come to me and they're like, oh, this part, it's hard to find this part and I need to talk to the customer, about it. So talk to the customer about it and explain, be honest, explain to them that typically these parts take 4 weeks to get and your computer needs that. And until then, here's a loaner, that kind of thing.
Right.
But if you don't,
oriented.
Right. And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to do their job, you couldn't make that suggestion to them and then they kind of flounder, unfortunately. I mean, teamwork is just that. It's teamwork. It's a bunch of people coming together for a common goal. And that's what needs to happen.
So I want to go back to a comment you made earlier about my culture at my company is terrible, right? But that you as a leader have the ability and even the authority and even the mandate to create a great culture. This idea of pockets of microculture inside of a huge organization. Like, I've worked with one company and I've worked with different teams inside of that company. And the difference between certain leaders changes the way I feel about that brand as a whole, simply because I worked with this leader versus that leader. So, you've been in that position. Tell us what has worked in building a microculture inside of a huge organization. What hasn't worked?
Well, one thing I didn't have when I was at the peak of my career was social media. But if I had social media today, I would be making it a point that, say like on my LinkedIn, that we'd be celebrating my team's successes. We'd be pointing out that, hey, we just tackled this type of project. Because that's one of the things that attracts strong talent is a variety of projects within tech. I mean, if you go into a company and they're still using, technology that's been outdated for years, you're not going to be as excited about going to work there. It almost feels like stepping backward. So by setting up a culture where you're celebrating their successes, you're giving them credit for the things that they did. You show other people out there that, hey, if I ever go to work for this guy, I'm going to get the recognition that I deserve. And honestly, that's kind of my answer. I coach some tech executives, and that's one of the things they all complain about is my culture in my company is terrible, but I have a great culture in my department. And I always say, use that to affect change in your organization. Show them that, look, 6 months ago, this is how our department operated. And now we've made these cultural shifts. And now we're operating like this and you're all praising us. Why can't we do that with our entire organization? And
Yeah.
you kind of, though, I mean, it's kind of a unique position for like a C-level executive to be in because they have a seat at the big table already and they can bring that up. It's like the department heads that, director of this, director of that, they need to get their voice heard and not be shy about getting their voice heard. And it just works. Culture, when you're comfortable working with a group of people, you get a lot more done and there's a lot less bickering and a lot less finger pointing because
Yeah.
everybody comes together almost like a family unit rather than some, work pod, which is what a lot of, I worked for years as just as a consultant going into companies. And I experienced what you're talking about. I'd go into a company and I'd have to spend 3 months with this department, 3 months with this department. He'd go, wow, am I in the same company? Like, this doesn't even feel
Right.
the same. Like, what's wrong here? And it always comes back to the leader. The people follow what the leader does and says. And that leader wasn't great. That's what it came down to.
And it's crazy. Like even in the same department, just different teams, you're like, wait a minute, these can't be the same brand. What's the Kool-Aid over here? Because it's not the same as where
Yeah.
I just was. So one of the things that you said with the social media that I thought was interesting is I'm flipping through my LinkedIn, right? As I do pretty much multiple times a day these days. And I see a lot of people posting selfies or posts about their own accolades. How cool would it be if instead of doing shameless self-promotion, there was selfless team promotion, right? And the idea of, I'm not even going to talk about myself, but I'm going to talk about Mike, who's doing this incredible thing. Just so happen Mike gets to be on my team and I get the benefit of that promotion. But it's all about Mike, who I've empowered to be successful. And John over here is doing something really cool. If every single week you were trying to focus on rewarding in private, giving bonuses, giving promotions, whatever, but promoting in public and celebrating publicly outside of your own little ecosystem, but shouting it out into the world to say, Mike is incredible. And if you ever, he's so good, and don't try to snap him up because he loves my team, but I want to promote him. I want to celebrate him because he is just the best at insert whatever Mike is the best at. I love that.
That's one of the problems I've always had with like the performance review systems that most big companies use is it's kept really, really private for a reason. They don't want to expose the issues that the person has. But what I've never understood is how come they don't publicize so-and-so hit 87% of their goals this quarter. That needs to be publicized because else why bother? If no one's, that's how people feel. If no one hears what I'm doing, why am I trying so hard? I can just be like the other guy that's not doing well and I get the same recognition that he does. And I think it's just a key element today where you got social media, people are following you. It's one of the things I love about doing my leadership podcast is I get to release quotes from those people and video snippets and then talk about what a great thing it is that they're doing. And it makes me feel really good to both promote them, but also expose to the world that look at all these things. Like someone recently asked me, what is something you've learned from your show after doing, I think at this point I've done 87 interviews. And I said, innovation is still alive because a lot of people say innovation is dead. But it's not. I've interviewed so many people with mind-blowing ideas that they've put into effect that innovation is alive and well. And that's really, it shocked them that I said that because of course it's a leadership show. So they thought I'd have some leadership insight. And I probably could if I thought about it. But that's the thing that sticks out to me. And when I look through episodes, I'm like, oh, this guy's doing AI with this. This guy's doing AI with something completely different. This person has an interesting leadership approach. This person is kind of as an edge case. It's really interesting to see what's out there in the business world.
And I personally am a big proponent of like AI specifically. And what I love about it is it gives me the freedom to leverage that human ingenuity side of my persona, right? Like I'm offloading the mundane things that are blocking me so that I can be really, truly creative.
Exactly.
A couple of things I want to touch on as you were saying that. I think it's important to make sure that it's in the moment and it feels authentic. Because the other thing I hate about performance reviews is it's once a year that you hear from your boss about how you're doing. And if I don't feel like I have the praise when I'm doing well, like people are that short-term memory that memory hole is like gone, right? If you're not praising your team in the moment that it is happening, and if it doesn't feel authentic to you and that you mean it, then it's never going to be successful. And that's one of the things that I've experienced, where you have a leader who doesn't really know who you are, doesn't even really know what you're working on, but it's like, thank you for all the good work you're doing. And you're like, can you even name any of the work that I'm doing? Do you even know what I'm up to? Right? Versus the leader who, I have a client who I actually just wrapped a project with, and they had what they called Win Wednesdays. And it was every single Wednesday, you could choose to or not shout out a person in our group space. So we were all kind of doing different work. We're distributed. And you could shout out, and it had to be something that was small or big, but that you understood and got to observe their success. So I might shout out my friend Ryan, who just finished an e-learning course that is just incredible. So I would say, hey, for my Win Wednesday, I really want to recognize Ryan. And so not only would the leader do the recognition, but the team would do recognition as well. And it was really cool to see people not talk about themselves, but talk about what impressed them about their team members.
One, a major side effect of doing that in the moment is that if you have to use criticism for some reason, it doesn't come off so harsh and unnecessary, because they realize that, well, you know what? This is a leader that when I do well, they tell me. And when I don't, they tell me. That's really important, because otherwise, if it feels contrived when you praise them and then you criticize them for things, they're just kind of like, okay, you only pick on me when I'm not doing well. You said this nice thing about me 2 weeks ago, but I never hear that otherwise. And I think it's really important. Like, even if you're just on a quick, I have a lot of remote team members, and when they pick up the phone and call me, if they've done something exceptionally well that day, I'll say, hey, great job on that spreadsheet that you put together for us, because they need to hear that. Otherwise, when it comes time to correct something, it feels like you're picking on them. Like, honestly,
they're going to start to get like a trauma response about positive praise. You only ever like that sandwiching concept of like good thing, bad thing, good thing. All of a sudden, you're going to give me a trauma response.
Yeah, good. Exactly.
And I think one thing you just said, it doesn't have to be big things like, oh, you did a really great job on that spreadsheet. Right?
Exactly.
So if they're working on it, because a lot of times I feel like we only celebrate the major milestones instead of the day to day. And I think it's really important that we focus on, how do I build a culture where even the most mundane, if I'm authentically impressed, I share that and I communicate that.
Agreed. Totally agree with you on that. It's just essential, because, I mean, look, people who are parents, you learn that rather quickly, that if all you ever do is correct your child and you never praise them, you don't get the results that you want out of them. And I look at that as the perfect example, just because children start out as a clean slate, and what they become is what you make them. And if they become somebody who doesn't ever listen and constantly misbehaves the first chance they get, that's on you. That, you didn't handle the corrective actions correctly. You need to, how is a kid supposed to know what's right if all you ever do is tell them what's wrong?
100%. And varying your comments, right? So if I only ever tell I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. If I only ever say to my 9-year-old that I'm proud of him when he gets a good grade, or when he wins the swim contest, or when he, passes his swimming lessons. I actually just had this situation. My 5-year-old did swimming lessons for the first time, and she passed her first class, and she was so proud, like so proud of it. And then she missed one mark on her second one, and she was devastated because she failed her swimming lesson. And she goes, "Mommy, did I pass?" And I could see that she was going to be devastated if I said no. So I was like, you passed everything except this one thing. And that's just what we're going to work on. Right. But she had wrapped up her little 5-year-old identity in passing swimming lessons. And it became a whole thing because one time we celebrated it. Right. And so people, even at that age of 5, want to feel that accolade, that celebration, that opportunity. Like, it's an innate human experience. And why are we fighting it once they become adults, once they become grownups?
Agree.
So I think, Mike, you and I could probably spend the entire day having this conversation. But, one thing I want to know from you, who do you think is really taking back Monday?
Well, it's actually a person who's been on my show, but also has become a friend of mine here in Las Vegas. His name is Dion Wilson. And he runs a company called Raster Technologies, and his entire being is wrapped up in helping artists monetize their works that maybe they couldn't have before. Maybe
Cool.
they didn't have protection over the work, couldn't afford to copyright it legally, et cetera. And so he's got this blockchain functionality that he's developing to help them with that. And he's just one of those people. It's what he's constantly working on. When you ask him questions about it, like we went to here in Vegas, we have a really thriving tech scene, and we went to a tech meetup together, and someone asked him, what is it that you do? And he started talking, and then they said, no. What's the benefit to the people? He had such a hard time telling them what he does. As soon as they asked for the benefit, it just came out of him like the most eloquent speaker ever. And it's because it's in his heart,
Right.
And that's the kind of people I want to surround myself with, is people who want to help other people and create a better environment for this niche or that niche, whatever it is, just create a better environment for them. I really admire him for that. I think he moved, he relocated, he has an elderly mom that he takes care of, but yet he's still passionate about helping these artists succeed and monetize their work.
That's cool. I love that. I always tell people that my life's mission is to do cool things with cool people. I want to build cool things with cool people, and that's really all I want to do. Awesome. Well, Mike, if someone is really connected with you, they want to learn more about your PACE program or just want to be, in your sphere, where can they find you online?
The easiest way to find me is to find me on LinkedIn, Michael Mahony, Mahony. I love to talk to people on there, and I respond to every message that I get. And also my website, toptiercoachingservices.com. There's a contact form there. You can reach out. There's even a way for you to book a call if you want to talk to me. So those are the two best ways.
Awesome. Well, I will put the links to both of those websites in the show notes. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Mike, for appearing on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.